for years I was in radio broadcasting in North Carolina. It's where my wife and I met, and we relocated to New York, and I'm from this area originally, so it was a homecoming of sorts for me. But I found myself in the role of stay-at-home dad, which is not something I had planned, and it was sometimes fantastic, sometimes a little trying, as anybody who's in that situation would understand. But I realized once, I have two kids, once they became old enough that they did not require constant attention, I needed something to focus on to maintain my own sanity. And that's when I started writing, and fast forward several years, I've now published 3 novels, a sports-themed cookbook, and a Christmas short story. It was an interesting project. It's called Candy Canes, A Story of Joy, Revenge, and Christmas. And it really materialized out of nowhere. I received an invitation from an author friend of mine on Facebook to participate in a writing challenge. And we talked about it and expanded upon it and launched something else entirely. And I got 2 other authors involved, and we collaborated, and we took turns passing the manuscript back and forth, adding to it, and came up with what I think is a really neat story. It's funny, it's a little quirky, it's sort of dark and gritty, but it does have a happy ending in typical Christmas fashion. And what's nice, it's available right now on Amazon, the ebook, for just $2.99. All of the proceeds benefit Toys for Tots. And there's also a website called smashwords.com where you can download the book there, any format you want, whether it's iBooks or Kindle or Nook, whatever. You can set your own price, so you can pay nothing or you can pay a couple of bucks. And again, any proceeds that are made will benefit Toys for Tots. So A Shot at Redemption was my first book. And my first challenge was, I would think, the same challenge as any first-time author. And it's answering the question of, what do I write about? So I fell back on the old adage of write what you know, which I no longer aspire to, but it seemed to be a good idea at the time. And I knew racing. I had grown up around short tracks. I went to college in Oswego, where A Shot at Redemption is set. I spent a couple of years writing for the Oswego Speedway program, so I got to know car owners, drivers, crew members. It gave me a look at sort of the raw underbelly of the sport, so I had that knowledge to draw from and some good resources when I had questions I didn't know the answers to. And then on top of that, sports in general and racing in particular is wonderful drama. You've got the intensity, the action, the danger, and all of that is an excellent framework for suspense. When I began work on Blind Switch, I didn't really plan on any recurring characters or any connections, anything like that. But going back to A Shot at Redemption, the main character in that book is a race car driver. He's very good, not very well liked, and he becomes the victim of sabotage and vandalism, and one of his crew members gets shot, all of which leads to a police investigation, and the detective who ran that investigation reemerges in Blind Switch. Instead of working in the Oswego Police Department, she has moved up a few rungs and is a member of the 87th Precinct of the NYPD. Blind Switch has a strong personal component. The protagonist and I have a couple things in common. We are both fiction authors, and we are both legally blind. And that's something that my whole life people have asked me, how much can you see? And it's a really impossible thing to try to explain to someone who's not really in the same situation. So I used Blind Switch to demonstrate to the reader how this woman sees the world and how the world sees her. And she actually, throughout the course of the story, ends up on the run from a trained assassin, and her visual impairity makes her that much more vulnerable, so it brings it even more to the forefront. So 21 Sundays was really a labor of love. I have been a football fan my entire life, and I've written about football for about the past 15 years or so. And thankfully, NFL players, coaches, even fans do some comically, we'll say, boneheaded things. so I had a bottomless well to draw upon. But the stuff I was writing, I was only sharing with a relatively small network of people, many of whom kept telling me, you need to do something more with this. And I thought about it, and I finally decided they were right, and I compiled what I felt was my best material, and I paired those stories with appropriate recipes, and then the whole thing is tied together with sort of a personal narrative. And what's nice about it, I would say, you don't have to be an NFL fan. You don't have to be familiar with the teams or the players to enjoy the book. They're funny stories. And in terms of the recipes, food is universal. So it's tailgate food, it is party food, it's food for a lazy Sunday on your couch. So I've got things like Super Supreme Mucho Macho Nachos, extreme tailgate brats, a lot of burger varieties, chicken wings, of course, and a lot of other great stuff. And I think I can promise it's the funniest cookbook you'll ever come across.